Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of People Problems. People Problems is a podcast where every week we will have a new guest on to discuss problems in their life. Our guest this week is Bailey Dobson. Bailey is a social butterfly, likes to hammock, hike, and she likes to paint. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Bailey Dobson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Kason?
Doing good. So before you came on, obviously you wanted to talk about depression and friendships, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of, did you have specific stories you want to talk about, or
Not necessarily.
just kind of it as like a whole?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So what is your, walk with depression been like?
So I guess it didn't really begin until probably my freshman year. And it kind of became one of those things where, in society we always hear, like, you're fine. It's okay. You're not depressed. It's not a big deal. And it's kind of become one of those, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a personality trait.
Yeah.
Like some people pose as I'm depressed or I have anxiety. And so when you kind of admit to yourself that, like, hey, I have something going on in my head that shouldn't be going on and it's not normal, it's a difficult thing because it's not something you can really talk about because people don't take it seriously anymore. It's just, like I said, it's something that people joke about.
Yeah.
But I think it was something that started my freshman year, and I kind of had pushed it off, and it was like a seasonal thing. Like sometimes I felt good, sometimes I went months where I felt like crap. And it wasn't until my sophomore year things really, really started to get bad. And I hit summer of my freshman year, like going into my sophomore year. I'd lost a lot of friends. And I didn't really feel like I could talk to anybody. So I just kind of kept to myself, and it was really unhealthy, I guess you would say. So that summer, I kind of pushed things away, started my sophomore year, and I felt pretty good about it. Started to make more friends, started new classes. I kind of felt like I had a fresh start. But I started, like, as I moved along my sophomore year, I had started to see all the things that I needed before my junior year in order to graduate. And so it was like, after my sophomore year, my view of my future had started to expand. And I was like, okay, well, what's after this? What's after my junior year? What's after my senior year?
Yeah.
And I guess it was a very, like, scary thought because I didn't have that much longer. Time flies by like crazy, and people tell you that all the time, but you don't really see it for yourself until you get there. And I had passed my sophomore year, and I had summer courses that I needed to take in order to keep all the credits that I wanted in order to finish high school. And I took 2 classes that were a month long, one of which I didn't do myself. I had to pay somebody to do it for me. So she ended up doing all of my econ work for me, which really isn't that difficult of a class, but I was taking a full year course during the summer in 1 month, which was way too much for me to handle. And one night I was trying to catch up on all my work that I couldn't keep up. I had a job, I had friends, and all this other stuff that was going on. And I was really, really, really behind. And I was staying up super late. My parents were headed to bed one night, and I couldn't finish the test on time. My grade was dropping, and it was just like everything in my world was crashing and burning. And I think I had finished the test and got my grade back, and it was a horrible grade. It was an F. And at that moment, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I am so exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. I can't help other people or even take care of myself at this point. So I broke down crying. my parents were like, it's not a big deal. Like, you're fine. It's just a test grade. We'll get it up. But meanwhile, I'm carrying all these expectations of my parents wanting me to take care of my grades and get these courses finished. That way I have a good future, because that's what it looks like, is that, each tiny little thing in every class matters.
Right.
So I started crying about my grade, and it was just a disaster. And then it finally came out. It was like the years of keeping everything to myself spilled out. And so I had told them, like, I can't eat, I can't sleep, I cry every single day. I don't have any motivation to do my schoolwork. I don't want to talk to people, which is like unusual for me because I love people. I love getting to know them. I love having deep conversations with people that I don't even know. It's just a part of who I am. And at that moment, my parents were like, what do we do? Yeah. Like, this is so uncommon because I'm such a bubbly and happy person. Right. And so I ended up getting counseling, and it was just this whole thing, but we'll get into that more as you.
Yeah. So most times, people, like we talked about earlier, like joke around with depression or like confuse it with like just being like sad. Like, when did you realize that you weren't just like sad? Like that you were like depressed?
So it's actually kind of funny. The moment I realized that I wasn't just sad was actually in my geometry class. And I was sitting in the back of the classroom listening to my teacher, Coach York, which he's the coach for the football team.
I have no idea.
He's a really good teacher. Most people think like, coaches are super laid back and they don't really care, but I learned a lot in that class, and he was a good teacher. But I sat in the back of the classroom, and I started to get really, really frustrated because I could not understand what we were learning. And I tried to ask for help, and he kind of like avoided me, and I didn't really know, like, I don't know. I didn't know what to do because I didn't understand it. I was asking questions, and no matter what, I couldn't get it together. So I was just kind of sitting there, and I started to get really, really, really frustrated. And after a moment or two, I just started crying. And I was like, this is a disaster. I can't keep it together. I'm literally in my geometry class, and I'm crying because I can't do this. And I started to thinking, like, is life even worth it? Like,
in geometry class.
Yeah, which sounds totally crazy because it has nothing to do with life. It's just a math class.
Yeah.
And so all these thoughts kind of like came flooding in of like, is this really worth it? Does it matter that much if I pass this class? Or does it matter to everybody else if I'm even here? Like,
wow.
If I was not here.
Yeah. Would people care?
Would people care?
Yeah.
Would they even have a second thought? And so, my point of view at that time was no. People don't really see a difference. They're not going to be like, oh, I'm so heartbroken, Bailey's gone. It's just going to be like, we miss her. It's
Darn.
not a big deal type of thing. Yeah. Like, oh, well, sucks. But it was like the tiniest little thing turned into the biggest thought.
Yeah.
And that was so scary because as soon as I started to think about all those things, it was like a trigger because more and more and more and more came in, and it was like,
just like
overwhelming.
Started, like, piling on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what did you like try to do, I guess, to like get out of this?
So I think the way I see it is everybody who deals with depression or anxiety or, ADHD or whatever it may be, everybody has a coping mechanism, whether they know it or not. My coping mechanism was to take advantage of the fact that I was a social butterfly. So I would make plans with everybody every day of the week for hours at a time. I was never, ever home anymore because when I was with somebody, I couldn't be alone in my thoughts.
Yeah.
Which that sounds really deep.
No, that's great.
When I was with other people, interacting with them and getting to hear about what they were dealing with took my mind off what I was dealing with. And so being able to help them, giving them advice to deal with what they were going through, in a way was kind of hypocritical because I couldn't even take care of myself, which was really frustrating, but that's how I kind of dealt with my problems, was to not be alone. And it was worse when I was alone at night in my room, because all I could do was just sit there and be like, yeah, this really sucks.
Yeah.
And it was kind of frustrating because not a lot of people knew, because I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, guys,
Guess what?
I didn't want to be another
I'm
one of those
depressed.
people. I'm depressed again. And so it was just kind of overwhelming. And the only way I could get out of my own head was to surround myself with people and their problems.
So would you say, like, I know, like, some people, like, when they, like, at least for me, like, when I struggle with depression as well, like, for me, it's just getting out of my house and just driving in my car, and just blaring music. But, so was yours, like, just hanging out with people and just trying to get yourself, like, out?
Just getting out of the house.
Yeah.
Getting not alone.
Yeah.
Like, for you, that works. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm still by myself
Right.
in my own head. And music plays a big part in my life. It's always been something for me that's like, it helps me, but it like also cannot. And so a lot of people say like, oh, like a lot of people can listen to music and it
Yeah.
changes their emotion like that.
I wouldn't say that. It's more for me that it just, like, distracts me,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think it does something different for everybody. Like for some people it can like numb their emotions and they're just
Yeah.
kind of caught in what they're listening to. But for me, my first instinct is to be like, oh, let's listen to sad music.
Gosh.
And then it's just crying.
And then
I'm
it's
like,
just over
and
and
it's
over
just a
again.
cycle
Yeah.
of bad thoughts.
Yeah.
So I guess the one thing I couldn't do was be alone.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally lost
No,
what I was gonna.
you were totally fine.
I had something like that I was gonna ask, and then I totally forgot about it. So a little bit earlier, you talked about, like, I think you said counseling.
Mhm.
Am I right on
Yeah.
that? How, like, are you currently in?
I am not.
So,
anymore.
so I guess talk me through, like, what that experience was like.
So you're pulling a whole lot here,
Sorry.
Kason. This comes with a lot.
Sorry, my bad.
No, you're totally fine. So I think when I talked to my parents the night that I kind of like broke down and I was like, here it is. Here's what your daughter actually looks like. They were like, okay. Well,
Did you have a problem doing that? Like, was that hard for you?
I did. And
Yeah.
my parents I have a very good relationship with my parents. They care a lot about me, and even if my best isn't good enough for the world, my best is good enough for them. And they make sure to like tell me that. But I think I'm the oldest of two, and I want to be the best that I can be. And I want them to be able to walk out in the world and brag about me. Which I know for a fact that they do, but my point is that my parents and I relationship is solid.
Yeah.
They care a lot about me. But I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want them to look at me differently, and I didn't want them to take what I was dealing with and blame it on themselves and be like, where did we go wrong?
Yeah.
So they wanted me to see a counselor, which when I told them what I was dealing with, I didn't tell them that I didn't see the point in being here. I just told them.
Oh, you didn't tell them,
no,
like, the whole.
I just told them that I was really sad. And so I went to see a counselor, and I was really skeptical about it at the beginning, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But the first week, that I went. It was like a once a week thing, and I went for only a few months. And so we kind of talked back and forth, and I told her what was going on in my head and why I just could not seem to like pull it together. And she challenged me. The first time I saw her, she challenged me with, until the next time I see you, which was 1 week, I want you to tell people no 4 times. Like, no, thank you. I'm okay. Just straight up no. And so, like, I thought about it throughout the week, and I was like, that's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
To just be like, because I'm a people pleaser.
Right.
I want everybody to be okay.
So you say no.
Is like,
no.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I completed the challenge, and I went back, and the second week was probably one of the most emotional weeks for me. That's kind of when, like, she started asking questions and pulling a lot from me that I didn't see in the beginning. And so I have a whole story with my parents, which you know the story.
Sorry.
Yeah. But long story short, my parents dealt with an alcohol addiction and over-the-counter pills and smoking and all those different things, which you know the story, but I'm going to share anyway.
Yeah, no, that's cool because, I mean, not everyone.
It won't make sense.
Yeah.
So I had a long line of alcoholism, if you will, in my family. And my parents separated when I was about 8 years old. They didn't divorce, they just separated. And after a few months, my dad wanted to be clean for my brother and I, which I have a younger brother. We're only 20 months apart, so we're pretty close in age. But he didn't really understand, like, he couldn't really comprehend the concept of an addiction at the age he was at. I was kind of old enough, and I think I've always been more mature than my age, so I was able to really understand it.
Know what was going on.
Yeah, and so they had separated, and my dad told my mom that she couldn't come back until she was clean. So after a while, it took her a few weeks, and then she came back, and she wanted to stay with us, and she wanted to be in our lives, and she wanted to be the mother that we always knew she could be for us. And it ended up not working out. And we sat down one day, and my parents had explained to us that they were going to get a divorce. And I think that was probably the most heartbreaking thing I've ever had to listen to, because I didn't want to be another one of those kids, which those kids are no different from me.
Yeah.
But like, I want to have my parents together.
Right.
I don't want to walk through life and
only have like one. Yeah.
And so having, like, the thought of not having a mother,
did it like scare you?
It did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't help but think, like, what happens when I get my first period? What happens when I, go to prom and I go to homecoming and I graduate and all these things that my mom's supposed to be there for?
Yeah.
She's not going to be there. And that was heartbreaking, because most teenage girls I know, they're like pretty much best friends with their mom. And the thought of not having that is just like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we had talked back and forth about, like, as she was asking me questions, she was pulling up things from that situation. Eventually, my parents got clean, and they got back together, and they remarried. And so my parents have been sober, and they've been together for 7 years now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I could not be more proud of anybody. My parents are my heroes. But as she started asking me questions, she was pulling stuff from me and my mom's relationship. And so I started to kind of see that a lot of what was going on in my world and my head had to do with the fact of what my mom did.
So it was because of her addiction?
It wasn't because of her addiction. It was because I guess I never really completely forgave her for what she did, which I had always said that I did. And in my head, I thought I had forgiven her. But when she was gone, the thought, like I said, the thought of not having her there was just like heartbreaking. I felt kind of like alone. Like nobody, I don't even know the statistics, but do you know how many people lose a parent and then their parents remarry? That has to be so small.
Yeah.
And the fact that I got to be one of those kids is like a miracle.
Awesome.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And I do not think, I didn't grow up in the church, but after my mom had left the first time, we had started going to church and I started to kind of understand who God was. And I think at that point I was like, well, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Like you could have picked any other kid in the world, and I am the one that has to deal with this.
Yeah.
And after everything had happened, and still to this day, I have never been more proud of a situation, even with my walk with depression. I have never been more proud than I was of my parents. And the only reason that I was pulled out of that situation was because of God. There's nobody else on this earth or ever that could pull somebody out of a situation like that.
Yeah.
And that's truly what I believe. And I thank God every single day, because if it wasn't for what my parents had walked through, I would not be the kid I am today. And I probably wouldn't still be here either. So when she started asking me those questions at have you really taken a second to think about it and think about whether or not you were actually okay with what happened? And so she kind of left me there to think about the situation. Am I actually okay with what happened? And I came back the next week, and when I came back with my mom, because she had wanted to prescribe me medication.
The counselor or your mom?
The counselor.
Okay.
And my mom was very skeptical about it, because I have to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to offend anybody. But she was very skeptical about it because she dealt with depression medication, and that was one of the things that she had issues with.
Because of the yeah.
And so I always tell people, I am a carbon copy of my mother. We look exactly alike, or we think exactly alike. And so a lot of my genes come from my mom and my mom's side of the family. And with that comes it's so easy for me to be addicted to things. And I don't ever want to put myself in a situation where I have to try something and then be like, oh no.
Yeah.
What happens now?
Yeah.
And so I always tell people I won't drink ever, not at my wedding, nothing.
Just because of the fear of being addicted?
Yeah. And the fear of having to walk through what my mom walked through. And so she was very skeptical about it. She didn't want it to be something that I 100% depended on. And for some people, that helps them. That's what that medication is for.
Yeah.
And we sat in her office and they were going back and forth about why I shouldn't be on medication. And my mom was like, well, yes, I understand that, but here's our little family circle here. And it doesn't work that way in our family. And so at the end of the conversation, my mom kind of left it up to me. And she was like, if you feel like
this is what you want to do.
Yeah, then you can do it. And so they were kind of still talking back and forth. And finally, like in the middle of the conversation, I just said, no. And they both kind of looked at me and they were like, no what? So I was like, I don't have anything against medication for depression. But I have a God who is bigger than I can even imagine and who deals with problems that are pea-size and problems that are bigger than we think.
Yeah.
And who am I to say that God can't fix my problem? That doesn't mean that, you know, God won't fix people who take medication for depression. It just means that I trust God, and I think I understood that he was not making me. He put me on this path for a reason, whether I see it and understand it or not. I'm walking through this, and he put me here because he wanted me here. And I will walk out when he's ready for me to walk out. So I said no, and I was like, I don't want to take medication for this because I believe that God has put me on this path because he wants me here. And when he's ready to pull me out of this
He'll do it.
Big hole that I'm in, he'll do it.
Yeah.
Not to say that people who believe the same thing can't take medication. I don't want to like offend. I'm so
Right.
afraid that
Yeah,
I'm going to
no, I
offend
get you.
somebody.
It's more, that's just what
That's what I think. And I feel like he's so much bigger than I think he is. I can't even wrap my head around it. And it took a while for me to like walk out of that. And honestly, at this point in time, I'm still being pulled back a little bit. And that's going to happen. I don't think anybody, when you walk through depression or anxiety or anything of the sort, I don't think you're ever going to be back where you started. Like when I get really, really upset, I always talk about like, I just want to be happy again. Like, I just want to be the second grade me that is loving their life and like things
just
couldn't be
without
better.
a care in the world.
Yeah. And I think especially that comes with being in high school because nowadays teenagers are very, the world is so loud and we can't focus on one thing. And a lot of the times we focus on the things that we shouldn't, meaning, whether it's alcohol or vaping or drugs or relationships, whatever it may be, we seem to not be able to focus on the right things, the things that matter the most. So I don't even remember what the question was, but
I think I was just asking you about counseling.
yeah. So after a few months,
I mean, you can keep going on the track you were. I mean, that's fine.
After a few months of counseling, when I sat there with my mom, I kind of had talked to her about how I felt because of what she did. And
what was that conversation like?
It was really emotional.
Yeah.
My mom is not a crier. And we both cried, and it was just, of course we were laughing because we both don't cry. And so we're just kind of laughing at what's going on. But I guess my mom has and always will continue to blame herself for the emotions that I feel. And that's not the case. It's not her fault. God put me and my family in that situation because he wanted to. And because I walked through it, I have the ability to go out and talk to people, maybe not who deal with the same thing, but who have felt the same emotions I have, and explain to them that, like, whether you believe in God or not, he's there, and he's going to take care of you. It may not be in the way, shape, or form that you want him to, and it may not be when you want him to, but he will. And that's so difficult because as high schoolers, we tend to I want this and I want it now. And if you don't get it, it's like the end of the world. And our life is on God's timing, not on our own. And being able to understand that is so difficult. Even as a Christian, I can't understand it all the time, because my human instinct is to be like, I have control over my own life and I can do things the way I want to do them.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, God created me the way he wanted me. So why do I, like, downgrade myself or downgrade where I'm at in life? Because he put me there
For a reason.
when and why he wanted me there.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Sorry, that was, like,
No,
completely aside from the
No,
question.
you're fine. Honestly, I like when people get sidetracked. Yeah, that kind of sounds weird, but, like, I feel like I don't know what you're going to want to talk about, like, coming into this, you know?
Yeah.
I basically just write questions I think is going to get a conversation going. And just hoping that people get sidetracked and start talking about stuff that I would never think about. Like, I would never think about to bring up your parents' addictions. Like, I would never think, like, writing these questions of,
Yeah.
like, oh, what did this play a role in
What
it,
about
you know?
your parents?
Yeah. So, like, I love when people get sidetracked because I think it makes the whole...
It gives a little bit of spice to the situation.
a little bit of spice. Yeah. So we talked about the depression kind of side of this episode, I guess.
Yeah.
So what was it about, like, friendship, I guess? And I guess my first question would be, did the struggles with friendships play a role in the depression?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta gather my thoughts.
No, you're cool. You're cool. Don't worry about it.
So, I think because of my coping mechanism, I'm gonna pull a little bit from the other side. Because of my coping mechanism, meaning, like, being with people all the time to keep me out of my own head, in a way kind of brought me to depend on people. Meaning, like, I depended on them to make me feel okay.
Yeah.
So when I was friends with people, I was like, okay, this is going to be a forever thing. We're going to be best friends. You're going to know everything about me, and we're going to do life together.
And that's not always true.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's never been the case for me. I think these past few months, I've finally come to realize, like, where I was and where I should be. And I've walked through a lot of friendships in many different places. And I think I depended on those friendships way more than I should have. I depended on my friends for the things I should have depended on God for. And so it was really difficult because obviously people grow apart.
Yeah.
And friendships end. And that's just how life is. Whether it's your fault, whether it's somebody else's fault, whether it doesn't even have to do with the two of you. But you have to accept that. I mean, you can be upset about it and you can grieve and do whatever you want. But eventually you need to learn that, like, that is life.
Yeah.
And people are not always going to be there. And the one thing that is consistent is God. So it's crazy to me because if the one thing in my life that's ever been consistent and it's always been there and it's always been understanding is God, then why is it so difficult for me as a human to put my trust in him and to be like, okay, God, you got it.
Yeah.
Like, you can, here's all of my
Here's what I'm
stuff.
struggling with.
And here you go.
Yeah.
So it's like, it puts me in awe to think about something like that. Like, I have a God that's this big And I have stuff that's like this big. And yet I can't still be like, okay, God, here you go. It's just so difficult for me. And I think, like I said, because I depended so much on other people, and when they let me down, it was like, oh my God, here we go again. Like, I got to find somebody new. I have to fill my schedule again. I have to do all of this stuff. And I tend to blame it on myself and look at the situation and be like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Where did I go wrong? Did I hurt them? Did I offend them? Like, or do they just genuinely not like me? So it's frustrating because I'm looking back on the friendship, and then I'm looking back and blaming myself, even if it had nothing to do with me. So yes, absolutely.
Do you feel like you sometimes, like, I guess, give more into a friendship than other people do?
Yes.
And that's kind of what you struggle with?
It's frustrating, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I don't know. I guess, like, I put my all into the friendship because I want it to last. And I want anybody that walks into my life, whether I know you or not, to feel like, okay, like, she can talk to me and she'll understand me and she'll help me and just feel comfortable around me in general. And I feel like I gave my all to my friendships, and they gave, like, maybe 50% back, which that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Like, I've had people that I've just grown apart from. But friendships where people leave and walk out, it's just kind of like, I don't know. I blame myself, and I shouldn't. But it definitely does have to do, like, and I 100% agree. Like, I feel a lot of the time like I'm giving way more than the other person is. But I also have to think about it and take a step back and be like, well, maybe they feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they feel like they're giving their all and I'm not giving.
Yeah.
So.
So would you... So you talked about, like, how, I guess, like, when you're in, like, I don't know how to word this, but I guess when you're feeling depressed. What about if I say that?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how else to word it. But, and you, like, the way to get out of it is hanging out with a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you... Sorry, I'm trying to think of how
you're
I
totally
can...
fine.
Because I have two questions, but I feel like one of them is more rude than the other. But I don't want to sound rude. Here, this is what I was going to ask. Do you feel like you're trying to throw yourself into friendships to, like, combat
Absolutely.
this, and then, like, you're just doing it to, I guess, stop or, like, help your depression?
Yes.
And then it's not a good friendship?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not rude. It's a genuine question, and honestly,
I more didn't know how to word it. That's
nobody's ever asked me that. I think I wouldn't say I necessarily throw myself into friendships, but I find somebody that I have a short and small connection with. Like, it could be the smallest thing, and I'm like, okay, we're best friends. Like, this is it. This is it. And I guess I kind of, like, I take that small thing and I turn it into this big thing. And I'm like, okay, like, this is the beginning.
Yeah.
We're best friends. We're going
Ride
to stick
or
it out
die.
together.
Yeah.
But I don't think I just find anybody. Like, I don't pick somebody out and be like, yeah.
This week, it's you.
Yep. This is it. You're stuck with me. But I will find somebody, and it's normally not, like I said, it's not just anybody. Like, I have to, like,
at least, like, know them.
Feel like there's something there. But over these past few months, I have really taken a step back from friendship And I joke about it all the time. I always say that I have no friends. Which, when I think about it, I have friends, okay? But I think there's a difference between, in my world, I think there's a difference between having really good friends
And having friends. Yeah.
Like, I think about that as just more of, like, acquaintances. So when I refer to friends, I refer to people, like, at our church, we always talk about, like, our 2 a.m. friends. The people that you can call at 2 in the morning and be like, hey, I'm not okay. And I have 2 of those people in my life right now. One of which is my boyfriend. So in reality, if you think about it, it's just one friend.
Yeah.
But I've come to the realization that I'm such a people pleaser and I want people to, like, be okay with me and, like, hey, like, I don't want any beef right now. But like we were just talking about, I feel like I give so much to a friendship and then I never get anything back. And over these past few months, God's really shown me that I have a God who is always going to be there. And people of this world, humans that he created, are not going to stay consistent in my life. Whether that's my boyfriend, my best friend, my parents, my brother, they're just, it's not the same thing. And he's really shown me that he is a God that gives me the ability to share with other people and give 100% into my friendships and never expect anything back, because he's a God that overflows my cup in the sense.
Yeah.
So, like, I can give and give and give and give and give and feel like I'm never going to get anything back from anybody human, but I have a God that is going to be like, okay, I will recharge you so you have the ability to go out and do it again. But I think in order for you to understand that, and I still haven't quite got there, is that I have to be able to give everything to him and be like, okay, here are the people that I want to pour out into. And some of them may give back, but it's not like God's giving back. Like, the relief you get from people in this world is not the same relief you get from my God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like, if you think about it, like, I don't know if y'all have ever seen Fast and Furious. Ugh, I want to be a race car driver so bad. But if you think about it, like, you have one car that's like all the humans, all the people on this earth, okay?
Yeah.
All my friends. And then you have the other car, and it's Jesus, okay? And you're like, you know, you're cruising, you're racing, and God's like way ahead. And so all the humans kind of like, and they're catching up. But then God's like, okay, I don't know what they have. It's like that little pump
the nitros?
thing. Yes.
Yeah.
And the human car doesn't have it, but Jesus got it. He's got a endless amount of it. And he's just zooming. He's taking off. So it's like, why would I depend on humans to give me back the energy that I can get from God? An endless amount, and the way better version. You've got like the great value version of it, and then you've got like, no offense, but like you've got like the great value version, which is like all the little humans, and then you've got like the smack dab, like, let's do this. That's Jesus. So why wouldn't I take advantage of the endless and like most efficient amount of energy I can get back? And I'm still, like, I'm stuck on that road, like, trying to remind myself that it is okay for friendships to not work the way I want it to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, that was a whole spiel.
Honestly, you're fine. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about? I don't have any more questions.
I
So,
mean, I don't think so.
is there anything I didn't touch on that you would like to share?
Jesus rocks.
Alright.
Jesus is it. If you don't have anything else, you've got Jesus. That's it. Like, yeah, I mean, that's it. You just really have to. I'm so bad about perspective. Looking at a situation from.
Like someone else's perspective?
Mm-hmm. And so Zach always tells me.
That's her boyfriend, by the way.
Yes.
She never name dropped, but that's okay.
He always tells me to take a bird's eye view of the situation. Like, take a second, pause, and be like, okay, how do they see things? How do people outside of the situation see it? Like, what's going on here? Before I'm like, okay, my opinion is the only one that matters, and I am always right. Because that's my first instinct. I am so hard-headed and stubborn. So therefore, my first instinct is to, like, blame it on other people. But if I take a step back and I'm like, okay, they may be going through it. They may just be, this may be growing apart. They may be, like, really struggling and they're not ready to talk about it yet. It could be a variety of
Has
things.
that helped you with losing these friendships?
Absolutely. And so I think it's helped me learn to find the value in certain people, like, and not take advantage of it. Because people that I've walked through friendships with and things have ended, whether it be really bad or like totally fine, I'm still friends with now. And now it's more of like we're friends.
Yeah.
We're good. There's no beef there. We're just kind of chilling. And it's good because I think both sides of the friendship have come to an understanding that, like, things ended differently for one person than it did for the other. And it ended because God wanted it to, not because it was, like, our little problem. Like, our opinion isn't the only one that matters. So, and it's so difficult for people to understand that concept. Like, just to be respectful about it and not to really take it to heart and be like, oh, I'm such a horrible person because they don't want to be my friend anymore. It's more of like okay, this is the way it has to be.
Yeah.
And if they come back and, like, this friendship,
Awesome.
fixes itself, then that's great.
Yeah.
But, like, take advantage of what you have. And, like, really, find those people. And they'll come when you least expect it. Like, my best friend now, well, aside from Zach, we've gone to school together for the past, 3 years. And her name's Sydney Ruda.
Whoa.
Shout out Sydney Ruda.
She just name dropped. Oh.
I love her. And I actually met her because she was set up with one of Kason and I's best friends. And
This story is hilarious.
she came.
So I went to school with her, and then
Yeah, but I didn't know she existed. And she came to a church event, and she's a very I don't want to say shy, because when you get to know her, she's like open. She's a very reserved person.
Yeah.
And you could tell that when she showed up, our church group is very awkward, and they're very funky and weird. And she had showed up not having a clue who any of us were. And I'd walked up, my social butterfly me, started talking to her, getting to know her. And there has never been a dull moment since. I call her every single day to check in with her. And she's honestly helped me through a lot of my problems. And she's always been like, hey, she points it back to God. She's so spiritually mature. And so she's like, well, if you don't got it, you don't think anybody else got it, God's got it. Like, you will be okay. And I mean, I literally met her in a parking lot. And I was like, hey, I don't know you, but, let's be friends. And she's stuck around since then. We haven't had any issues. I mean, there's been, stupid stuff,
yeah,
petty stuff
yeah.
that girls get mad about, but like it's been good. And she showed up and she's helped me through a lot of stuff. And she knows I've known Sydney for like, I don't know, a pretty short amount of time, I would say. Shorter than a lot of my other friendships. And yet she knows more about me than any of my other friendships have. Minus Zach. Zach knows more about me than anybody. But Sydney got to know the most about me in a shorter span of time than I was friends with anybody else. Because she's, I don't know, she's different. And like, I'm different, you're different, he's different. It's just like, you find people that you click with better than others.
Yeah.
And, you know, she walked in when I didn't expect it, and we've been friends ever since, and couldn't be more thankful.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening and watching to another episode of People Problems Podcast. If you didn't already know, we have a pretty sweet YouTube channel, People Problems Podcast, where we post the full versions of all of these episodes. If you don't want to listen to it, you can watch it there. If you don't want to watch it, you're like, hey, I want to listen to this in my car or wherever. You can find us anywhere where you like to listen to podcasts. And then we do have an Instagram account where we, I guess, post when episodes are live. I don't know. That's pretty much the gist of it. Thanks for watching and listening. Obviously, thank you for being here, participating. But yeah, goodbye.